Welcome to Season 3 of the Knack for Business podcast. Over 350 episodes strong, we're here to ignite your entrepreneurial spirit with fresh insights, networking gems, and creative strategies that elevate your game.
Question for the audience: how can you create a meaningful, long-lasting business that inspires the next generation and still makes sense in today's fast-paced world? On this episode, Anthony, founder of the Rose of Education organization, also called TREO, shares how he turned decades of tech experience and the wisdom of becoming a grandparent into an educational startup that blends fun, fitness, and future thinking. You will hear how slow, purpose-driven entrepreneurship can build something powerful and sustainable, especially when it's rooted in values, learning, and play. So our guest today is Anthony Hall of the Rose Education TREO. Anthony, aka Grandpa Stork, is an IT professional with over 3 decades of experience in hardware and software development. Becoming a grandparent nearly 21 years ago inspired him to start TREO, to develop educational games and to help make lifelong learning and fitness fun for all kids, big and small. Anthony, Grandpa, welcome. What's your favorite quote or saying, man?
All right. Bernie, Wayne, it's so great to be here. Thank you for having me on your show to talk with your guests and talk about Grandpa's slow way to entrepreneurship and what I've learned over the years. You asked me what my favorite quote is? I have a lot of them. I get a lot of inspiration from movies. I'm a movie buff. One of them is from the Batman Begins movie, where Ra's al Ghul says, "Will is everything. Training is nothing. Training is nothing. Will is everything. The will to act." And so for me, that saying really resonates with me. The will, the purpose, that we can discount everything, but if we have the will to step forward and step out of our comfort zone, that is really what sets us apart and can set us up for greatness.
Anthony, you led into my first question. We all have whims. Some have dreams. But what implemented your will? What made you act? Why and how?
Almost 21 years ago, I was blessed to witness the birth of my first grandson. And I was there in the delivery room watching my daughter become a mother. A weird, wonderful experience. Almost 40 years ago, I watched her being born. For me, that was a transformative moment. I'm holding him in my arms and I'm transported through time, reviewing my life and what my life had been up to that moment. I found myself wanting what had I been doing with my life. And that kind of spurred me to think about, what can I do? How can I be a more active participant in my new grandchild's life and what I could do to help set him up for success and for finding his way through this world. Yeah, that was, for me, that was the moment that kicked things off.
So you're in the IT universe, you become a grandpa, and something got flipped. They had to do something. So how did you swing into action? What were the next steps for you?
Getting laid off from my 13-year gig at this software company I've been working for as the director of sales and business development in Silicon Valley, I had to think, okay, what's your next play? At 51 years old, not having gone to university, I had come into that field by accident. I had answered an ad to answer actually I was sent on an assignment to answer the phones for this laptop computer phone company. So basically, I was transferring calls to the sales and tech support department. That process of discovering that I could have a career in a field that I hadn't studied computer science in school, but the fact that my own curiosity, which led me to ask questions of the sales team and the tech support team, the questions I was passing on, led me to understand that I understood the concept. What was interesting was that as I watched the engineers take apart and put the laptops together, it dawned on me, that's not too much different from when we're building houses or decks, because that was one of my first careers in the building trades, building houses, decks, foundations, digging ditches. And that was a light bulb moment for me. The veil of mystery really came down and said, wow, okay, it's not as complicated as I thought, as I initially imagined. A week after I got hired, we answered the phones. They hired me full-time in the sales department. That was in 1992, and I haven't looked back since. Silicon Valley became my playground as I transferred to different companies, and I got paid to learn. But it was that process that really the idea that what about other young folks, the young people like myself, that if only through exposure could find that they had an aptitude for these. And so when I got laid off and was thinking about, okay, what's my next play? And it was always in the back of my mind that, okay, what can I use? What gifts do I have that I can impart to my grandchildren? I have 5 grandchildren now, and how can I really help empower them and help them discover their gifts and their talents, their superpowers, as it were, so that they can see themselves a part of an industry that not just as consumers, but as innovators and leaders. And so once I got laid off, and I already had the plan in my mind for starting the company, a month after I got laid off in October 2010, I incorporated my company, the Rose of Education, now known as TREO. I just spent my time the first 3 years learning what it is, the challenges teachers and educators face, my experience as a student in school, ways that I was not engaged with the learning. I'd rather be outside on the football field or down in the creek. How could I turn that way that I could help others? And my thinking was, when I think about my grandchildren, young minority boys and girls, how can we help engage them in education and find their joy of learning and understand how they learn? That set me off, and okay, let's do this. It's been a good ride so far.
I'm a geek. So when I think of TREO, I think of a PDA from the 90s.
I had a chair. I had one of those as well.
The general thing is you face a situation. The first 2 responses are complain and mope. You didn't choose either of those. Tell me about how you walked through unfamiliar territory to achieve what you hope to achieve, and maybe even the setbacks in the way to make it happen.
I think it's my innate curiosity, and I really have to credit our parents. Growing up, they put it upon us that nobody's going to come to save you. We have the responsibility to take care of ourselves. Don't look to the government for handouts or anything else. That is my parents. Say, you're a Black man. This is the reality of your life. And we have a responsibility not only to ourselves, but to our community to be an example, to be an inspiration, and that to develop our gifts. And really through watching them go through situations where I remember in 1968 when I was 9 years old and everything that was happening then, the assassinations of JFK and MLK, and watching them really not sitting back and complaining, but taking action. Decide, okay, these voices have been silenced. What could they do through the community to be an empowering voice? And so we watched them take the opportunity to, at the time, a couple of years afterwards, they formed an organization called the African American Cultural Exhibit Association, really helped educate and inspire this new generation of minorities to really empower me to think about our heritage. We have a rich legacy. They created Black history exhibits, and most impactful was that in 1970-71, they're invited to put on the largest and first of its kind Black history exhibit at the California State Fair, Cal Expo. Watching our parents, ordinary people doing extraordinary things, I couldn't do any less. That was really part of our upbringing that formed my outlook about, okay, what can I do? I thought about, okay, I've spent all these years watching these cats in the garages turning their imaginations into applications and products and seeing that process. I learned a bit about that. Grandpa can do the same thing. That was really part of my inspiration and the confidence that I had that ability as well, knowing that process is about collaboration. It's just talking to folks. When we were developing software hardware products, it was just a bunch of guys and girls in a room at a whiteboard, throwing ideas about this. What should this hardware platform be supported? What should we sunset this application set? And it was all about talking. In fact, my job was really just talking and writing, and how that really is the skill set, the people skills, those soft skills that organizations are looking for. That is what kind of really separates individuals, and people can set themselves apart through their imagination, through their curiosity, through their willingness to learn. And I wanted to impart that to my grandchildren as well.
A quick sponsor message. Got a mug in hand? Good, because freshly brewed coaching is best served with your favorite roast. Join Wayne Pratt and Matt Hawksley as they spill the beans on how everyday pros, just like you, can use real coaching tools to level up their careers, teams, and mindset. It's bold, it's real, it's freshly brewed. Grab your free shot of clarity at freshlybrewedcoaching.com.
You have something about the dragon's fire flying egg. So conjures the imagination of dragons, fire, flying, and egg. Tell us that story. How does that wrap around into the things you're doing now?
When I decided that this was the direction I was going into, thinking about my grandchildren, and part of it talked about holding my grandson in my arms and being transported through time. One of the visions was imagining my grandson 50 years from that moment holding his first grandchild. What would be the state of the world? What would be the state of education, job opportunities, and would my grandchildren have a stake in that future? Director of sales, my job was projecting basically into the future, what hardware and software, what the state of the industry, where was it going? And so as I thought about that, I imagined, okay, so late 2050s, 2060s, the U.S. and former USSR will be celebrating the centennial of their space programs. The idea that during that time we'll be celebrating not only the moon landings, but also what is to come, the space mining, the space colonies, all this efforts. But then, and so the idea that that would be happening coming in the future, and would my grandchildren have a stake in that? Will the children of the world be a part of that? So the road TREO is a space tourism industry startup. Our intent is to develop the games and sports that humanity will play in space. And so the idea of what kind of games we play in zero or low gravity, I wasn't thinking about building rockets or satellites. What about playing? Nobody's talking about playing or games that would be a big part of people's reality who are working in space, especially those who are dealing with the infrastructure, the mechanics, engineers, the technicians, and maybe even families there. How will they learn and be educated? How will they recreate? Part of my thought was I always wanted to fly the Silver Surfboard. I want to build, that's what I want to build. Wouldn't that be a great way to help inspire my grandson? The idea that we can learn to fly together, that I could help expose them to the technologies, the science, technology, engineering, the math of flying the Silver Surfboard or on Harry Potter's broom or on the back of a dragon. What would that actually take? How would you simulate that? That was really my own passion project, to build a high-speed, high maneuverability flying surfboard. But as I thought about that, really, the technology, actually, that part is the easy part. But what about the human aspect? How would we mitigate the mental and physical rigors of bird or dragon flight on the human body? How will we stay on? How will we balance? And so that became the idea behind simulating that. How will we simulate what that process may be like? I don't want to just build something to stand over it and break my neck, because I don't even know how to maintain my balance. Could we simulate that process? And what could be an evocative way to convey that and share that with my grandkids? How could I talk to them about that? And of course, dragons have always been a popular part of humanity's the metaphor for freedom and rebirth. The idea could be a way to entice, engage, and introduce these technological concepts to not only my grandchildren, but children around the world, using dragons as a way to popularize the concept was, for me, thinking about it as got my sales hat and marketing hat on. I was like, okay, how do we catch people's attention? Hey, flying on what would it be like to stand on the back of a dragon while it's flying? Using that as a way to engage people of all sorts, young and old, big and small. And that's really been a great way to keep people's interest, but also keep my own as well.
We are looking at storytelling is very old, thankfully. And we look at this 50 years where we're not going outside anymore and helicopter parents and all this. You've managed to make tech, storytelling, and physical play. You've married them. Tell me about that.
When I think about that, they're all connected. We are the technology. It comes and stems from us, from our imaginations, from our relationship to the world and how we connect. And that there really, to me, really isn't a separation. And so the investigation and curiosity I had was about how do we convey that to others? For me, play is the way I've always learned. I've always made games out of everything, but especially things I didn't like to do, like mopping or sweeping the floor. I turned into a dance, dancing around with a broom or making a song. And that was, for me, but that's how humanity has always learned, through play, our place in the world, our place in the tribe, or our connection with the environment. And so that, for me, just became a natural extension of and connection to what I was looking to create. And when I think about my own learning experience, it was through that curiosity and playing around with the technology and really finding ways and telling stories to myself, even though I didn't study computer science in school related to the building trades, which I had experience with. I was able to develop my own stories to relate to others in the field, just down to earth stories about how our technologies work, the practicality of it, how it would apply to their business and how it would empower and accelerate their work, as well as impact the bottom line of their companies. That became a part of the story, and just weaving all those facets of the story and the business case, the technology, and all these other parts. Storytelling is really a big part of the company. Been successful so far in engaging, get early adopters and people interested in what TREO was doing, and to be interested in becoming a part of this journey, of this circus, as they tell people, come join the circus, because it's really that kind of feel, and we wanted to inspire people that way as well.
I always wanted to have the bass drum. Interestingly enough, you talk about storytelling. Tell me about, in your story, the one surprise, the one aha, the one I did not know that as a business owner, you learned.
Through storytelling, you can connect with pretty much everyone. I've had the great privilege, as I've followed this quest for the dragons, to travel over the past 11 years. I've celebrated 11 years on the road, traveling on this entrepreneurial journey to develop the concept as well as share it. And I've been to over 20 countries. I've lived in 8. And what has always been consistent is finding out that we all have the same stories to tell. We all have the same loves and concerns, laugh at the same type of jokes, and that the connection to these stories and how they apply to our own lives is really universal. And that really was, for me, the aha moment that, okay, it's that what we think we're developing in isolation led me to the road after 3 years of investigating and trying to develop and learn. I'm not an educator, so I spent the first 3 years learning. Then in 2014, I got on the road to test these concepts in the wild. That had been, for me, the opportunity to see what people's reaction would be, and mingling with these different cultures and living amongst them in the slums of India or Nairobi, Kenya, in the mountainous villages of Malawi or Nepal. And it really became just, okay, you're on with something, that we can convey these big ideas in a way that everyone can grasp. I remember one of the things that I learned when talking to people that you should be able to tell it to your grandmother should understand, or even your grandchild. 6-year-old they should be able to understand what you're building, what you're trying to create, even if it's a software AI application or game. That for me was big moment and big validation for the concept we were developing, and ultimately the games and the MVP that we now have of the Dragon's Fire Flying Egg. And to say a little bit about that, the egg is actually an acronym. Stands for exercises, games, and gear. So we're building, developing dragon flying exercises, dragon flying games, and dragon flying gear, and really tapping into the world's fantasy of human-powered flight and how we can turn that into a virtual reality.
Are you finding that along this journey, there were points in time you're going, what do I do next? I'm not sure. You're breaking new ground. And as you break trailblazing, sometimes I got to make the path. I am the path. Do you ever feel you got hung up on any point where you're going, is there something you would relate to other people to say, listen, you hit this point, it's seminal, but what would be your answer?
Early on, when I was first obsessed with this vision, I really didn't know how to explain it to other people, especially family members. I knew how to speak about it from a technological sense. My ex-wife and my wife at the time and their family, they didn't understand the work I did for the software company, but they took it for granted that must have known what I was doing. So when I began relating to them about starting my own company and what it was going to be about, I found that it completely just went over their heads because I wasn't speaking to them about it in the way that I was even told at one point, I think you need to say something about it. That was really deflating. Even though I had prepared myself for losing my work, I saw the writing on the wall. And so I'd make sure that because I moved from Northern California to Ohio in 2007, I brought my California paycheck to Ohio. So during that time, before I was just stacking money. When I got laid off, I had a 3-year cushion. The idea that I had to do something to bring some money in. I had to hit my pride and find work that could help pay the bills, even though they were low-paying minimum wage jobs, but also would have still allowed me to focus on the vision. And initially, what maybe people saw as a setback or failure to realize this dream, I was able to turn into a way that, okay, I can keep up my sales skills. I keep up my customer-facing skills. And even through these setbacks, there was always a path forward. And again, I think about our parents that showed us that way. And really, I think it's our belief and having that faith in ourselves, and also our why, why I was involved with this. I knew that there's always a way, whether it be through the door or through the window or over the wall, that we can we have to make a path for ourselves. And it's the famous quote, I'm not sure who it was, but it says, there's no path until we start walking. So walking a path and choosing a path, I decided on a path for myself, put one foot in front of the other. And that's how you have to keep walking. We just put one foot in front of the other and maintain our belief in ourselves, even amidst those downtimes. So for me, it was connecting with all of these things that I love, whether they be movies or musicals or my love of reading. All these sayings and quotes really help bolster me. We see those stories throughout the global stories, whether it be Odysseus or other amazing stories that speak to the power of humanity's ingenuity, and that we can find that way. We can find a path. And that's really what helped me stay the path.
I'm imagining Hamilton in space. You've come a long way. You saw something no one saw, got probably gently mocked a little bit, and you're at a plateau. Tell me about how it keeps growing. How does TREO and Anthony Hall grow in the next 5 years?
Part of it was when I started my company, we talk about the slow way of entrepreneurship. And that was really, for me, the first thought that I didn't want to follow the same path as other entrepreneurs. Start fast, fail fast, and build and iterate. I wanted to give myself the time to learn and to grow in the progress to see how this vision would play out. Instead of having a 3 or 5 year business plan, I gave myself a 50-year business plan. And because the vision was for the company, I envisioned the company's 50-year anniversary, November 24th, 2060. And so that is the target date of what we will be unveiling at that time. And so y'all are invited to TREO 50th anniversary, where we'll be unveiling our flagship, the Eden 3 Moon Colony. To your question, seeing myself as part of a story and being able to track our progress through that kind of storytelling narrative, knowing that I had this 50-year timeline and being able to see, okay, where we come from. Where we at now at this point now, almost 15 years into that timeline. And for me, I feel like we're pretty much right on schedule. The total of 14 years of following this vision and dream, and that in the next 5 years, we will have, not only at this point do we have an MVP of the Dragon's Fire Flying Egg. The first prototype actually was a coconut. We were using to demonstrate the concept, and now it's evolved into a 3D printed version of MVP that we've been placing under folks' feet so they can experience the awareness, balance, and core strength needed to flying on the simulator that we're building. We'll be able to return to these countries now that we have more than just a coconut to share with these organizations, the schools that we've done pilot programs with, that we can then continue building upon developing our STEAM teams. So what we feel the next 5 years, we'll have launched the Space Arc, an academy for real kids, big and small, that we've met over these past 11 years of traveling, that will launch this as a way then to build teams in all these STEAM teams in all these different countries that we visited to really help identify, nurture, and cultivate young geniuses, future innovators, and leaders. We want them to be not just a captive audience, but captains of industry and enterprises in this space economy that is actually here now. The space economy is projected to be worth between $4 and $10 trillion in the 2040s. So we're preparing for that. We figure we have to start now. We want to leverage the imagination and curiosity of these young folks. We're talking about building games and sports. Well, who best to go to than these young people with these amazing imaginations, that they're the ones who have helped really develop and get feedback on the concept, and we want them to be part of TREO's teams. We're building a pipeline through these games, and organizations we partner with, they will be part of these international teams that will help design and develop an off-world habitat, sustainable habitat for spacefarers. And in the next 5 years, the next phase, TREO's work is developing teams of youth around the world to help TREO launch its space ambitions, that they'll be a part of that. They'll inform and come up with the ideas for how do we solve or dissolve some of the problems that humanity will face with space colonization, space travel, and that we can give, there will be projects that help work on that, become part of this grand community we've been building over time. And right now, we're in 12 different countries where we've developed these partnerships, and we're going to continue building on that.
You mentioned the egg. So you talked about it being an acronym, but it's an actual physical product.
Yeah.
How big is the egg? Or the question Pop said, now, although you're talking about kids, at the end of the day, we're all kids, really. The play still is part and parcel. Is that the physical exercise? Are you stepping on an egg and doing the balance piece, which then lends itself well when you are in a zero-G gravity space? Your core muscles will still function. If you're playing football, you definitely, if the linebacker comes at you, it's the physical mass and gravity that's pinning you down versus being in space. So is that where you're mixing the physical piece and the exercise piece and being adaptive?
Great question. The first prototype was a coconut, but the vision really had been, if I imagine from the Game of Thrones, Daenerys's dragon's egg we hold in your hand. And so imagine that being cut in half, set it down, the flat surface down, the curved surface on top, and that is what you stand on. And so that's the platform. And so the first version, so the egg is really the first version of a suite of projects. The first MVP will be non-technical without any embedded technology inside. The egg is about 6.5 inches long, 5.5 inches wide, and about 3 inches tall. And so very compact, portable. You can take it to do it at home, and at the park, in the office, at the gym. And with that, the egg, the non-tech version is a precursor to the tech-enabled version that would have an IMU board, accelerometers, pressure sensors that will then gauge your weight, your weight transfer, your movements, and everything. And so really the egg is the first step to learning the physical exercise of learning what it would take to play in the game. And so it's the entry port, not only for kids, but also for old farts who are still young and hard like us folks here. And actually, as when you think about developing a product, who's going to pull out money for this? Who's the demographic that the first version will be targeted at? And as I thought about what is it like to stand on the back of a dragon while it's flying, as we get older, standing and even walking can be just like that. Our steps become unsure, the ground seems to sway up under us. So that demographic then for us is like 45 to 85-year-olds. How do we help conquer the fear of falling and turn that into freedom, into independence? And so that's where we're at now, that we're really targeting that. How do we help the older population? Because falls is a big part of, and costs a lot of money in falls, not only to government, but even personally, and financially and physically and emotionally as well. And being able to tap into that. How do we regain that fearlessness we had as young folks, as young kids, tapping into that imagination, into the inner child that we still are inside, using the game and play as a way to inspire the old folks to really regain their confidence. And for me, I'm the poster grandparent. Well, this helped me turn back the clock. It's helped me in my rehab of my sports injury. When I was 40 years old, I had my first sports injury playing football in a football tournament. I ruptured my Achilles, and it took 16 months to heal from that. When I was 42, I broke my fibula playing in a football game with my dumb ass. And then I've had surgery in both knees, the meniscus cleaned out, and the exercise and workout has really helped me regain not only my mobility, but the strength and flexibility I had as a youth, the strength in my ankles and the confidence to take stairs 2 at a time or go on long hikes up in the mountains like we're going to do later on this evening. We're here in Belfast, go up Cave Hill to do some long walks and hikes. And so that's, for me, really, that when we talk about big kids and little kids, it's really tapping into that we can regain that freedom and independence and confidence through this playful exercise and game to imagine that we can still be active. I wanted to build a game that I could play with my grandkids, a physical game that's low or no impact, but still challenging to me as an athlete that I was, and that I still, in my mind, think I am, even though my body doesn't heed my mind as it used to. But to get a good measure of that back, and that we can use the dragon's egg as a way to help others like ourselves as well.
You may have wanted to use some of those impactful games that didn't involve football.
Yeah. Golf. The dragon's egg is also a sports training platform. Imagine you're standing on the egg and shooting a basketball, or hitting a baseball, or playing golf, or just meditating, doing yoga. So it's become a platform that not only for the dragon flying game, but for everything we do while we're on our feet. It's just a way of stepping up our game, as it were. And it's like and it really takes back, I think of lift up your heels, Dorothy. That's really what it is. Just like we were standing when we were kids, we stand on one leg and say, look, Ma, I can fly. And it really harkens back to what we do naturally and how we incorporate that. It's a way to elevate our game and our performance in all aspects.
This has been a very interesting podcast. Who do you want to phone you? What would they be offering, and how do they get a hold of you?
All right. So where we're at now, we're before the launch of our MVP. One of the things we're looking to do is now get it to many folks as possible. We want people who'd be interested in becoming testers to give us feedback so we can start collecting the metrics and data that we can then use to show not only the market viability and its acceptance, but the kind of numbers that we can use when we're talking to investors. People be interested in becoming play testers, organizations, schools, nonprofits. I took the Dragon's Egg and we developed an art, fitness, and literacy program around that, and visited a drug abuse prevention organization in Tanzania. They had about a dozen men from ages 20s to their 60s to see how this game could help support their recovery. Sports centers, athletic teams, anyone interested, especially older individuals who like to see if they could benefit from that to get their feedback. We have a 3D printed model, but it's not the final iteration. And even though we've actually sold over 74 of the initial prototypes, about 70 of the coconut shells, the first sale we had was in Germany. Sold the first painted coconut shells for €30. And folks, they really just show that there was interest in that. And we're looking for people to help join this service, join this quest.
Are you in LinkedIn?
So we have, Droz Education has an open group. I can share those links with you. And I'm on LinkedIn as Anthony M. Hall, on YouTube as Grandpa Stork, on Instagram as Grandpa Stork, on X, on Facebook. So yeah, we're really developing a presence as well as our website.
I want to say thank you to Anthony Hall, my co-host Wayne Pratt, and you, the Knack for Business listeners. If you're looking for a program that keeps agility, play, and the future in mind, reach out to Anthony. It doesn't matter whether you're dealing with kids, the inner kid that's still inside you, or just mobility. He's the person to reach out.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVENSIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motiveau.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter U.ca, or his website, motiveau.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people. Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert. Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host. Jovan Strika from @Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space. Then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner, and Wayne Pratt from Motivate You, Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer. Please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.